in the country, in the continent, with 400 partners and 9,000 people in 34 countries. And this year, the South African firm have launched their own Foundation for the Future programme. And in March, associates from the UK are going over to On Secondment. So ties with Africa are ever more important. So it's great that we can have Paul and Chika here from the Africa Business Group. So if you could all join me in giving them a warm welcome.
Thanks, James. Can you hear me all right at the back? Yeah, okay, good. It's always nice to get a clap before we've even started. I'll bag that one and see how it goes. But I'm just actually fresh probably not the right words, but from Africa this morning. So I spent the week in Cameroon with my family and just got back overnight via Paris. A bit of an arduous trip. Because when I'm paying, I don't go business class, strangely enough. Although that might change soon. We thought we'd take this over, and your thing about sort of turning potential into success is very relevant, both for what PwC is doing in Africa and also for Africa itself, I think. Chika and I are founder members, or two of the three founders of the Africa Business Group, which we established about 2 years ago, and it's gone from being a part-time sort of voluntary operation in our spare time to being both of our full-time job. So my role is on the alliance that some of you will have heard about that we've got now with the African firm, where I'm the partner who sits across the alliance working with both sides. I used to be on the board of the UK firm a few years ago. I'm now on the board of PwC Africa. And my job is basically to help the African firm to identify its strategic opportunities, where investment makes sense to try and build a business across the continent, in which competencies, in which industries, and exactly where on the continent, and then to help them to achieve that objective and build a business. And as James said, it's already a substantial practice. We have, as James said, getting over 9,000 people across the continent, so we're not small at all. So when people often talk about the Middle East and the alliance we've got with them, and think of Africa as being new and therefore smaller, actually the African firm is something like 3 times the size of the Middle East already before we even started. So there's lots to build on, particularly in South Africa, and as James mentioned, there's some good stuff going on with Foundation for the Future starting up there for the first time. Not only that exchange, but also 50 people coming into the firm in South Africa to be trained by our people in the new year to kick them off. Just thought we'd start with a few facts or factoids about Africa. There's an awful lot of stuff going on about, you'll hear the phrase Africa rising a lot. I think it's the President of the World Bank was saying recently at a conference that both of us attended that basically, there's got someone on WebEx who's joining me. Basically, he was saying that it's a huge stereotype and generalisation. But I think when you take it against all the negative stereotypes and generalisations that we've made about Africa over the years, then it's perhaps helpful to have a positive generalisation to sort of set against it. So these are some of the reasons for the growth story and the reason why the business is now interested. And this map, incidentally, you'll see some of the countries that are in pink. It's broadly intended to show the countries that make up PwC Africa, as we call it. Now, it's not the whole continent, but we have offices in 34 to 54 countries. The pink ones are largely the English-speaking and Portuguese-speaking countries. There are 1 or 2 gaps in the lower part of the continent.
Okay,
being one of them.
so in addition to that, could you...
So Malawi is one of them. We actually do have offices there, so it's not quite accurate, but essentially there is also in the centre of the continent the Francophone territories, and France is working closely with them as well. So we have a joint approach, France working with Francophone Africa, and the UK working with Anglophone and Portuguese-speaking countries. Most of the interesting, from an economic perspective, most of the interesting countries are in the Anglophone and Portuguese zone rather than the French zone. So I think we have a good opportunity to make a difference. So a larger middle class in India, well, that's a sort of very broad statement. It rather depends on how you define middle class. To get into this definition of middle class, it probably wouldn't quite tick your boxes, but but basically, disposable income is growing. That's really important. The world's youngest population and a growing workforce. The average age of a lot of these countries is actually now crossing 18 and going into sort of adulthood. So you've got potential for a huge workforce to take advantage of. Some of the Southeast Asian countries had this sort of demographic dividend, as we talked about a few years ago, sort of 30, 40 years ago, and took advantage of it by introducing industrialisation and really building their economies. Lowering dependency ratios, lots of foreign direct investment, and as often said, 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. So, I mean, lots of positive stuff about the continent, and they're some of the bare bones on which to build. You'll have heard people talk about megatrends a lot, and the 5 megatrends are all shown here, and I'm sure you'll get access to these slides, and they're largely self-explanatory, but I think there's some really interesting things here which you see when you're on the ground in Africa all the time. So if you start at the left-hand end and you look at it, the demographic and social change, well, the demographic change I've already referred to. There's a huge growing population. Some of the figures for the growth populations are astounding. When I was a child learning about Cameroon, the population was about 7 million back in the 70s. It's now 21. It's forecast to be 50 by 2050. And importantly within that, one of the other megatrends, urbanisation. Whereas we had probably only 3 million people living in cities back in 1975, we're projected to have 35 million people living in cities in Cameroon in 2050. The figures for Chika's country, Nigeria, are even bigger, but then everything about Nigeria is bigger, as you can often tell. So, demographics are really important, but social change is also happening. So, with urbanisation, these megatrends are really intertwined. You see some major social changes. And just the latest outbreak of social change yesterday in terms of people's ability to take responsibility, sort of tell the president what they think in Burkina Faso, which you might have seen on the news. The president's essentially overthrown and the parliament building burnt down over the president who's already been there for 25 years, trying to extend his rule by changing the constitution. So this could be the beginnings of a kind of West African spring that might be like the Arab Spring, we don't know yet. There's certainly things that are getting quite volatile in certain places, so you have to take care as well. We won't go through all of these, we haven't got time to touch them in the Q&A. Climate change is also important, and resource scarcity. Well, Africa has access to many of the world's natural resources, and most of the countries in Africa are hugely resource rich, so that's often been a focus for investors coming into the continent in the past. It's going to be even more true in the future as the world's population grows from 7 billion to 9 billion over the next 25, 30 years. We're going to need even more natural resources, and Africa has got a disproportionate amount of those resources to draw on. And that's an opportunity for the continent. But I think one of the things we do need to see is a different relationship, if you like, between the developed world and Africa, much more a partnership of equals rather than what we've had in the past. So that all feeds into the politics as well as the economics of this. Technology is fascinating, and I think mobile phones for me have been the real best example of the effect that technology can have in places like any African country you care to pick. I first noticed probably about 2008 that all of a sudden people who had no fixed line phones now has within Cameroon, to take that as an example, they had access to mobile phones for the first time, and very quickly almost everybody had a mobile, and there are now something like 900 million mobile phones in sub-Saharan Africa, so roughly one per person. And that's because often people have more than one in many countries where the networks can be unreliable. Nevertheless, the penetration of mobiles has astounded everybody. And what you can do with mobiles is fascinating. The most often quoted example is in Kenya, a system called M-Pesa, where it's used essentially to transfer money. So people who, generally speaking, in most African countries don't have access to bank accounts are now able to transfer money between themselves as if they've got a bank account just through their mobile phones. We can't do that here. So it's a good example of where Africa has leapfrogged and not gone through the development path that we have here in Europe. People will never have fixed line phones. People will never have desktop computers, maybe not even laptops. It's heading that way. I was just saying to Chika on the way in, because when I went into Cameroon recently, I've not been able to get access to my emails, which is, at least that's what I tell people in the office. No, it's actually true. It's only actually last month that 3G arrived in Cameroon, and as a result, the iPhone won't work without an email system. But a friend of mine just said, oh, I'll just bring you this gadget I've got. And he turned up something about half the size of a mobile phone, which basically acts as a Wi-Fi broadband. And you just plug it in, fire up the battery. Once it's charged, it seems to run for hours and hours. And basically, yesterday I just had it in my pocket, had my mobile in another pocket, and it just kept, wherever I went, it just downloaded my emails. It's amazing. Again, something I've never seen here. So as people create new solutions in place of old ones, where the old ones don't actually exist in Africa, we're going to see very rapid moves forward, and hopefully that will bring greater economic growth. So I'm going to have a look at these slides at your leisure. There's lots of examples, and we can talk about some of the growth. And one of the ones at the bottom talks about the number of African megacities, and there are already 2 or 3 that are over 10 million people, but there are going to be a hell of a lot more. There are already as many 1 million people cities in Africa as there are in Europe, and there's going to be, that's 52, there's going to be another 400 by 2050. So I mean, that's actually amazing figures. This slide looks at some of the downsides, so I won't dwell on it, but I mean, I think we all know about them. Poverty, inequality are major issues in Africa still. We have some significant issues with disease. This slide was created actually before the Ebola outbreak really took hold, but that's obviously become the thing at the moment. Infrastructure, lack of skilled people. So if you want to start a business, even something like manufacturing, it's very hard to find people who are work ready to come in and deliver for you. So competitiveness for African countries often involves investing in infrastructure, investing in power, but very importantly, investing in human capital. And one of the things that PwC is going to do is obviously create jobs and act as a professional service firm and grow the economy, help grow the economy through those means. So there are some massive issues still to deal with, so let's not kid ourselves about that. But in all emerging markets you get volatility, and Africa is perhaps the best example of that. So what's the vision for PwC Africa? Well, at the moment the business is around $650 million annual revenue. We want to get it to $1 billion in about 3 to 4 years. So that's pretty aggressive growth, roughly 50% growth for over 3 years. Places like Nigeria, the growth at the moment is 25-30% in the firm, so it's growing really fast. It's quite a challenge to maintain brand quality when growing at that speed. You're bringing new people in, you've got to make sure that they deliver in a PwC-like way. So that is a real challenge. One thing I would say about working in Africa is that about PwC's purpose. When I first saw the purpose, I mean, I've been here long enough, 19 years, to see a few value sets and mission statements come and go, I have to say. And when I saw the purpose, which is, I'm sure you can reel off here, is very much about basically, sorry? Yes, I'm getting there. It's about building trust. I should have asked the audience, shouldn't I? Building trust and solving important problems. And if you think about the way in which, it's easy to see from what we've already said, that there are many important problems to solve, like infrastructure. But I think for me, the issue of building trust is really fundamental. So as an advisory partner, I've never been really that involved with assurance and the whole issues around building trust in financial markets. But when you look at what doesn't work in Africa, an awful lot of the problems come down to lack of trust. There could be lack of trust in the social area between different tribal groups, different countries, very small countries, often badly designed, many of them landlocked. They don't work together very well, so countries like Rwanda and Uganda are some distance from the coast. They've got resources, but how do you get them out of the ground and out of the country? You have to go through your neighbours, and sometimes that leads to tariff barriers, failure to agree on regional infrastructure that will make things better, lots of problems. So building trust, absolutely essential, and we will get involved as PwC in building trust in governments. We will help governments to establish trust with their people, move from being rather dictatorial, top-down regimes to more citizen-centred governments. We will help institutions, as we're already doing, places like Democratic Republic of Congo, where we've got a team, have had for 5 years now in Kinshasa, helping the police force there to basically move from being essentially a militarised police force into something that will be much more recognisable to us, which is a big move in terms of what is the police there to do? Is it there to control the population, or is it there to serve the population? That sort of transition doesn't happen easily in an environment of low trust. But also in financial markets, building stock exchanges, getting rid of corruption, working through the process of getting companies to grow in a way that investors can be certain that their money is going to a reliable organisation. This whole area of trust runs through every part of society, and it's weak in most of those places in most African countries, and that's something you can generalise about. Even in South Africa, massive issues with all of those issues, and something that a brand like ours can really play a role in. So that's very much key to the growth story. Just the last thing I'll say on the Alliance, I mean, we mentioned secondments, particularly in relation to Foundation for the Future, but what we're doing at the moment is to start developing an investment plan with the African partners, and that's basically encompassing all our lines of service, but advisory in particular, both consulting and deals. We're putting some ambitious plans together to grow significantly in the next few years. We will help them to hire people, we will work with them to hire people here, we will work with them to second people from here, and of course the bulk of them will be hired in the local markets. But what you have to remember is in relatively small firms, if you are growing at 25% a year, that's quite a burden. So to take Nigeria as an example, they made up 5 new partners this July. They previously had 21 retired, so it's basically a 20% net growth in the partnership just in 1 year. Now, even if you carry on growing at 20%, you're still going to struggle to double the firm quickly. We probably want to get to 50 partners in Nigeria in the next 3 or 4 years. Now, where do we find the people is a big challenge. So there are lots of opportunities as a result for people in the firm at the moment, but also people who aren't in the firm. So, a real significant challenge, but I think people see the opportunity and want to make it happen. The advent of Strategy And you'll see banners around the building, and most of them came to the building today. I think it's a real opportunity for us, but also a challenge. They are very global in the way they operate. They don't have anybody in Africa at all in terms of being based, but they do fly people in to work. And the opportunity to essentially raise our game from a brand perspective is really important with Strategy And. We are seen very narrowly. If you go to an African country, many African countries, and say you're a consultant from PwC, they'll be very surprised because they think we do audit and tax and not much else. So we are changing the perception of the brand here in many cases, and bringing in Strategy And alongside us will help to speed that process. I'll mention quickly the investment priorities, the 4 in the middle column that we've chosen. Capital projects and infrastructure. I've said already, a massive need both in power and transport infrastructure, but also digital to bring forward economic growth. Oil and gas, government I mentioned too, and finally you shouldn't forget financial services. Huge opportunity. Most people in Africa don't have bank accounts. Insurance is still quite a new concept as well. We were talking about some of my father's property yesterday, and I asked him what he did for insurance, and he just looked blankly at me, and that's probably says it all. He's been in government, he's kind of in the elite of society, and house insurance is kind of something that he hasn't really ever thought about. So, that's an opportunity for people like Prudential, Legal General, everyone else who wants to move into Africa. And some of them are doing that. So Prudential just opened the offices in Ghana and Kenya, for example. So lots of opportunities. It's not just about Africa, it's about the wider region, including the Middle East, and all working together, because we can try and grow the practice as fast as we can in the continent, but it's also about getting the best people in front of the client anywhere in Africa. So rather than talk about PwC Africa and the pink countries you saw on the screen earlier, we tend to talk about PwC in Africa, because we're not going to limit ourselves simply to the people we've got in the territories to deliver the goods to the clients. The Africa Business Group is a key part of this, and Chika's just going to say a little bit about the Africa Business Group and I guess how we started and what our objectives are.
Thanks, Paul. Hi everyone. As Paul said, we started Africa Business Group a couple of years ago from a multicultural business network meeting, and I was doing it part-time for doing my job. My background is forensic services, so I'm a forensic accountant by training, but I moved on to do this full-time, which is kind of like my dream job, for a year now. Yeah, about a year. And it's really been exciting. And what we've been trying to do very briefly with Africa Business Group is sort of create a professional community, let me put it that way, and not just of African diaspora, but everybody that is interested in Africa and want to be part of what PwC is doing in Africa. And essentially, I see our remit as quite two-pronged. One is internally to harness all the talents that we have in PwC and make sure that everybody that wants to can be part of what we're doing in Africa. So making sure that people know what the opportunities are and how they can get involved, and trying to find ways that we can get as many people as possible involved in what PwC wants to achieve in Africa, but also educating our people here as well on the competencies of our African firm, and not just the opportunities that are there for them, but how the African firm can support them in reaching their clients. And the goal of this part of what we want to do is to bring a closer collaboration between the two firms, the UK firm, the African firm, any wider PwC network firm. So we begin to have a one firm approach to Africa. What we're looking for, at least for me, my dream is that we think of an opportunity to work with Standard Chartered Bank, and we can immediately put together a multi-territory team of who our experts are, irrespective of where they are in the world, and everybody focuses their expertise on that opportunity and we deliver. So it's not so much as, oh, this is PwC UK opportunity, therefore only PwC UK people should work on it. So we're always asking ourselves, what is our best foot forward? We're not there yet, but that's what we want to get to. So if we find an opportunity, we'll find something to do with the government, with the clients, we can think, what is our best foot forward? Where is it? Is it in Brazil? Is it in Dubai? Is it in Africa? Wherever they are, we put them together and we concentrate that expertise to deliver the best PwC can do for that client. So that's the long-term goal, and that's the whole focus of our internal harnessing of talents and creating a community. So we know who is an expert in what, who is interested in what. That sort of knowledge is very handy. The other side of it is the external bit. We are very good at what we do in PwC, but we tend to work in silos. So everybody is good in their little units. And every day I keep learning new things that PwC does. And I've been in PwC 7 years, going to 8 years now. And I still don't know the range of what we do. And then now, imagine the challenge of trying to sell PwC's expertise in Africa to clients. Because if we don't know the range of what we do, how do we put it together to say, this is what we do? In Africa, just before I came to this meeting, I met up with two partners in the ID team. And it's just amazing the range of work that they do. In a different, whether it's gender, it's working with police, it's working with girls' education, and you think of other opportunities that different sectors of the firm are trying to pitch for, that knowing about this could help in differentiating our bid, or being able to say, look, this is what we do, and we can actually apply it to you, say that to a client, but they can't say it because they don't know it. So we have a big challenge to start marketing PwC well, so sort of pull together all that we do and focus on showcasing it to our clients. So within the Big Four, I'm biased, but I think we do a lot more. And we have such depth of expertise, but we are very, very poor in marketing ourselves, in being able to say, this is what we do, and just shouting it from the rooftops. So that's the external challenge that is facing us, being able to collate all these things internally, but put it out there where clients can access them, relationship partners, staff can access them easily and link their clients to it. So that's what we're trying to do in the Africa Business Group, promote PwC externally, but bring us together internally. You have to do the internal one first to be able to do the external one effectively. I think that's about that.
We're getting better at marketing, in fact, which is good because that's your job. But say a little bit about the summit last week.
Yeah, so we had this really exciting summit, very exciting summit at the Savoy last week, wasn't it? And we had about 13 PwC attendees from 8 countries. So we have the senior partners of Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, Tanzania, all together, and infrastructure partner from South Africa, all together in a room, hosting a PwC launch with clients from Africa. For me, that was such a powerful statement. This is PwC. You know, you talk to this person, oh, I'm based in Uganda, you, I'm based in Tanzania, you, I'm based in Kenya. That is PwC, we're a global firm, the world is our community, and we were able to display that, you know, and it's the sort of thing we were trying to do. We had 4 heads of state in attendance. I think we met with 2. We met with the Ghanaian head of state, and we met with the Tanzanian head of state. And for me, it's great to see, you know, Paul is from the UK, and we had a senior partner from Nigeria and a senior partner from Ghana going to see the Ghanaian president. And then we had a senior partner from Kenya, a partner from South Africa, and a senior partner from Tanzania going to see the Tanzanian president. That alone tells them this is not, you know, a regional firm. Do you see what I mean? And it makes a big statement of how integrated we are, whether we really are or not. But you know, the fact that we could pull together these people to talk about our issues and host clients together, small thing, but very, very effective. And the summit was attended by people from all over the world. It was massive, really high profile. We had the president and we had people from AFDB. Think of DFN, you know, most of the international organizations. We had ministers from from the 4 countries, and you know, lots of senior CEOs from the big you know, companies operating in Africa and from huge private equity firms. And I thought the fact that we could put together a multi-territory team across, you know, across different countries, different sectors, with a whole range of expertise. So if you just think of the 13 people from PwC, from these sectors and their expertise, we put together, you know, their CVs, and just those 13 people, it was a powerful statement of the expertise that sits within PwC. But until we begin to come out of our silos and come out together, you know, and go to market together, you don't get the full effect of that. If we keep, you know, we just have, you know, an assurance partner, talking to partners in Kenya, that's it. That, you know, PwC is just like one of the accounting firms in Kenya. But we harness ourselves together, we make a big statement. We do have a mailing list, a newsletter that goes out every month. And the next issue, we're going to focus a lot on a lot of details from the summit. It's very hard to say in a few minutes all the highlights from the summit and just how we're able to showcase what PwC was all about. So if you are interested in being part of that mailing list, just ping me an email and I'll add you to it and send you lots of information. They come every month about what we do in Africa Business Group and what PwC in Africa does. It's not just Africa Business Group here in the UK, but you know, our wider network. But we're excited. It's not just a commercial opportunity, but I see, you know, an opportunity to have an impact, to be part of something that is not just commercially exciting, but also deeply meaningful. And you know, I'm grateful that I'm part of it. And anybody that wants to be part of this community, please feel free to contact me.
Great. Personal highlight for me at the summit was being the lead sponsor and being the partner in charge. I ended up at lunch at Buckingham Palace with Prince Andrew and some of the heads of state, which was very nice. Don't do that every week. Actually, with the Ghana president meeting was also interesting because our senior partners obviously got a very good relationship with the president. You imagine Ian Powell sort of wandering in to see David Cameron and saying, "All right, Dave, how's it going?" Sort of, it was a bit like that. Except that Felix, the senior partner, was 10 minutes late for the meeting with the president. Fortunately, the president was 15 minutes late. I was outside seriously sweating. Felix was chairing the meeting, and I was sort of next on the list to take over, and I didn't have quite enough to say about beyond that. But anyway, it went well. So just to finish, I mean, these are what we're trying to do, essentially focus. There are 54 countries, there are a whole range of PwC services, as Chica said. There are a huge number of industries that we could look at. If we don't focus, we'll just get spread too thin. Integration, bringing everyone together, very strongly about what the Africa Business Group is there for. The people side of it, I think, is fundamental, both in terms of developing talent in the country, but bringing it also into the continent. Investment is necessary, we have to take some risks. Not every investment we make will work, but that's the nature of taking some risks. And in our previous investments in the Middle East and Central Eastern Europe, they've been followed within a year by crisis in the second. So it was no surprise when Ebola reared its head this time round. It's the sort of thing that tests your seriousness about whether or not you want to carry on. And we stuck it through the Arab Spring in the Middle East and made it successful and doubled the size of the business. And we're going to stick it through whatever happens with the Ebola crisis. And I suspect you'll be hearing more. I've been away this week, so I'm not sure what's been announced. Perhaps something has been announced about the firm raising money, but also we're talking to the Liberian government about doing work directly, and we've been commissioned by the World Health Organization. So we're having a real impact in different ways in that crisis, and that comes back to the point about our purpose of solving important problems and the ground we talked about. So that was, I guess, the key points. We've got some time for a few questions if there are any, and we'd love to have a chat about it, hear what you've got to say, comments, questions. Welcome. There's a roving mic at the back. Don't be shy. We'd like to start at the front.
We actually have a question from our South African associates, and they're asking, it is often seen that Africa have a lot to offer but lacks the skill set to utilize resources to their benefit. Is it not better to train people from the bottom end rather than placing the person at the top?
Yes, good question. I think some of what I was just saying, I think very much goes to the point about the need to train local people. Many of the countries involved are not where people would first choose to be on secondments. If you look at UK secondments, they tend to be, there are more to Sydney than anywhere else, and then New York would be second. So it's not easy to get people to go. So the source has got to be local people fundamentally. The issue is how quickly can you start getting local people to the top, as you put it. And that absolutely will happen in time. The growth will give people locally in countries, including South Africa, the opportunity to become partners quicker than they would otherwise be done. If we can actually speed up that process of growth, then that will create more room for everyone. So it's very much about building capability locally, and the movement in of people from outside the network is partly to build capacity and be sustainable and long-term about it, not a long-term strategy. As people will know about South Africa, that if you look at the weakness of the rand at the moment, it just doesn't make sense for the UK to send in large numbers of people. We can't earn rates, but we're finding ways of trying to put in enough expertise to make a difference. In the current situation of African Bank, which is, I guess, the SA equivalent of Lehman Brothers, where Tom Winsborough, the head of financial services in South Africa, is leading that role. We've got two partners and a director working more or less full-time supporting him, giving technical BRS, business recovery services expertise to bring that in, and that's the combination we're trying to find. But very much about long-term building capacity locally, and indeed many of the people who come onto Common from the UK, many of them, the ones who've expressed interest, are often African themselves. Question at the back.
Does PwC in Africa have to bend or modify any of its values that we have in the UK, given in Africa the way of doing business is so much different than it is here?
That's a good question. So for those who didn't pick that up, it's about values. Do we have to modify our values in order to be successful in business in Africa? I might ask Chika to say something about her experience in forensics in Nigeria about that, because you've had some interesting experiences. But I mean, just as a general point, I think it's a brilliant question actually, and a very challenging one. I think on one level, wherever you work in the world, you have to change not your core values. And I think actually it's great that when you work with different people around the world, you actually find out that people in PwC have remarkably consistent culture and values. But there is a need to be flexible and recognise different local ways of doing things. I think the challenge starts when you have to identify when something is crossing the line between being culturally different and fundamentally wrong. And that is a very difficult call to make, and one that I think is best dealt with by consulting among a group of people within the firm, and in particular consulting the local people about what to do. So if you go on to, for example, the risk of corruption in Nigeria, which is something everyone's very well aware of, then the people who know most about it are our partners and staff in Nigeria, and they are our biggest protection against dealing with the wrong people. But fundamentally, I think core values are constant, but some flexibility required. I mean, Chika, do you want to add something?
Yeah. So I went to Nigeria last year to do a forensic investigation into a corruption case. And, I'll pick up what Paul said about not changing your core values, but you've got to be flexible enough to recognize what is core and wrong, and what is just cosmetic, and what is just a cultural thing. So for instance, I'll give you an example. If I did an investigation here in the UK once, and it's quite formal and straightforward. If I'm having a suspect interview, we sit around the table, it's clear that we're having, an interview. It's clear to you that you're a suspect. You're entitled to bring a second person with you. You can bring your lawyer, you can bring a second employer, or whatever. Or you're entitled to somebody. You know your rights. I know my rights. I ask you the questions. You answer my questions. That's very clear. You can't do that in Nigeria. So, for instance, if we're having it here, we had it in a hotel. You come with your people. I come with people. We sit down. I ask you questions. You answer me. And neutral ground. That is the UK culture. Everybody understands it. I go to do an investigation in Nigeria. I don't make it. The worst thing I can do for myself is to alert you that you're a suspect, because that's it. They clam up. You can't say anything. So your manner has to be different. I've got to recognize, things like, older people like a lot more respect. If I have to call you sir, I'll call you sir, and just get you to say things. So it's just. You see what I mean? It's sort of walking around the cultural things, and it's important. I mean, I could do it because I'm Nigerian, so I know the culture, and I know what it is I could get. An elderly man old enough to be my dad up, the fact that I am investigating him, but you sort of know how to sit down and get him to relax. I mean, we did about, I am one of the managers in Nigeria, we did about 3-4 interviews, and all of those interviews were held in their houses because that's what they wanted. They wanted to be in their zone. It's a sort of, I want to be in my territory. I would never, ever in the UK, ever have any investigation or interview or anything in anybody's house. But